The sunshone obligingly over the setemilits bicaraje, glinting of palace tapots, silver cake tones, and the catching el monocle. It was a perfect June afternoon, warm, with a breeze still levanting fluttering along the hedgerows. In the little village of Edgewater, the annual garden party was as much a ritual as event or gossip at the butcher's, and used as rich in hidden meaning. Miss Marple sat under the striped tent near the Rose Arch, her blue-grey eyes quietly observing the comings and goings of her fellow parishioners. Clad in lavender and with a lace handkerchief tucked neatly into her sleeve, she appeared as unobtrusive as ever, a woman to be offered tea and left to her knitting. Only to her well understood how deeply she listened. The church ladies was like bees around the pancakes and cucumber sandwiches. Emery Prescott's lemon drizzle was competing silently with a discovery pulling for the vicar's brass, and attention over whose Victoria's pan good winning for accolades of the day was as taut as piano wire. Idaresai, Jane, said Bamburi, leaning toward Miss Marple, and so body as double the sugar in her span this year, trying to curry favor with the bishop. Miss Marple smiled without looking up, or perhaps sweetened it out of guilt. He hears borrow her sister's hands after that unfortunate business with the Paris back off. Emer's Bamburi gasped, delighted and scandally said, it was during the tear pouring of tea that they took an unexpected turn. The vicar's wife, Emersbury, had used began to target in these forte contributions when a sudden clatter drew everyone's attention to the far end of the lawn. There, by the guite trees, a table overturned, and standing beside with Cyril Maddox, the water's most dignified dear kennel, his usually ruddy face ascend, his hands trembling. I say, stammered, looking down at the object in his hand. It was small, metallic, and hardly out of place. It was a Peter Vatten. No one would have taken much notice, except that Maddox then looked toward the rose bushes, where a crumpled figure lay half-hidden among the stems. A woman's body. There was a shriek. A tea cups chattered on the flagstones. Someone fainted. Miss Marple, unsacking, rose to her feet and moved carefully toward the body. It was by Ellie Grene. Miss Grene had not been a particularly beloved figure in Edgewater. A recent arrival from London, se invented the old tones en cottage and made no secret of her desire to modernize the village's customs. She attacked over the library committee, questioned the choice hymn selection, and insisted on serving French cheeses at the women's guild luncheon. There had been some who admired her boldness, mostly men, but many more who bristled. She had also, it was whispered, taken a curious interest in the local historical archives, especially those relating to a now-defunct regiment that had once passed through water during the wars. Césaire, said the doctor, arriving 10 minutes later and kneeling beside her. Neck broken, must be fallen, or being pushed. A glance up at the crowd of faces now gathered around the rose bushes. Miss Marple said nothing, but her eyes had already scanned the ground, a trail of flattened grass, a heel marked near the trees, and, used barely visible beneath the edge of the overturned tablecloth, a second Peter Vatten. Later, after the police accordoned the garden, and after the party dispersed in hushed groups down the lane, Miss Marple remained. Inspector Crier arrived from Barchester, al star a collar and officious front. He recognized Miss Marple instantly and nodded in her direction. A nasty business, Miss Marple. You don't suppose this was simply a tragic fall? Possibly, she said. I smiled. But I've never known anyone to fall into rose bushes and lose their buttons in the process. Cry looked intrigued. You've spotted something already. Oh no, she said, her voice soft. Only a pattern. I don't like to follow patterns, Inspector. That evening, Miss Marple sat in her parlour, the gas lamp casting warm pools of light on her needlework. On the side table lay a silver dish, and it, to Peter Vattens, one slightly scuffed, but military issue. She opened the small notebook and began to hold in her neat, lupin hand. Vaili Grene, recent arrival. Known to have added into local records. Not Welliket. Phone the Vai Regis. To Vattens, military, Peter. Colonel Maddox found one. Appears checked. Real? Or toes checked? She pose. Vatten not from current uniform. Older. Passably pre-WW. Symbol on crest. Partially faded. Cold be Edgewater volunteer guard. She tapped her pencil against the paper. Secrets, she thought, were very very vai time. They were very vai charm. Ans chama la gueo growing roots, especially in quiet places, where people whisper instead of confess. By the following morning, the village of Egueter was whisper kilashin. News of Eiligen is there to travel faster than the milk cart, and far more efficiently than the vicar's Sunday sermon. Though the garden party attended in chows, the gossip it sparked was as orderly and methodic as any choir. At the greengrocers, the topic was ripening faster than the apricots. Dropped it in the roses, said it, declaring a combe, clashing a vago petatus like they were clues. And not a mark on her dress, mind you. That's what strikes me. Fell into zones, they say, well, I don't believe it. I heard it was poison, said Elsie Turner, lowering her voice. A subtle kind. Something foreign. Foreign? MSI combe scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. No, I tell you what it is. It's that kinematics. Phone her, didn't they? Buttons flying everywhere. You don't use drop a pepter button for no reason. Pepter? Elsie frowned. I thought it was in the rifles. Didn't they use a brass? Neither woman noticed Miss Marple pause outside the shop front. Her glove had adjusting her magazine listened without repeating to. She continued on, past the Villa Green and the little post office, toward her usual tools a coffee with the vicar's wife, Emmelsbury. The vicarage drawing room was filled with the soft scent of lavender polish and honey biscuits. Emmelsbury, always a mixture of genteel fluster and quiet pride, was still visibly shaken. I simply can't believe it, I said, pouring tea with slightly trembling hands. One moment we were admiring the double span, and the next, well, poor Belit, lying in the roses like Ophelia without the poetry. Miss Marple sipped politely. Did you know her well? I asked. Only in the way one must replied. She had rather strong opinions for someone so new, and she seemed very interested in the church archives. I spent hours in the vestry leafing through dusty records. Says she was researching the Egueter regiment for a book, though I never saw her write a single page. And this she get along with kinematics. Emerestekesbury hesitative. Egues cordial. At first, but it recalim sign, odir y son te gossip. Do go on, Miss Marple said, gently encouraging. Well, I told my husband last week that she'd asked too many questions. Something about his grandfather's service, or medals, or uniforms. I wasn't that pleased. Said, the past very for a reason. Very unlike him. Not unlike men who spent a lifetime honoring appearances, Miss Marple murmured. Emerestekesbury blinked. You think, Oh, I think nothing yet, Miss Marple said, patting her friend's hand. But one mustn't mistake silence for peace. In villages like ours, that were often unrelative. At that same hour, Inspector Craig was passing the vestry of St. Mildred's with an expression of mild annoyance. The Peter buttons were now in evidence bags, and the coroner's early findings suggested by Ellie Grenes that, at the care at roughly 3:30 de la tarde, almost exactly the height of the garden party. No bruising to indicate a struggle, a matter, but the necks broken al desame. Not something she did to herself. A glance down at the notice his constable attacking. Known to stir trouble. Arrogant, private, intelligent. No family, no friends. Not no friends, said Father Tekesbury gently, entering the room. She spoke to me uncertain about her work. She believed secrets were like mold. You only find them when the lid's used right. Craig gave him a flat look. Philosophy don't help me, Reverend. I believe someone in the village was hiding something. The vicar continued. Military relative. She asked if he remembered any missing plaques or improperly recorded dedications. And did you? He said no. But it got me thinking. I crossed to a narrow cabinet near the back wall, opened it, and pulled out a dead Paris lobo oak. There is a line here. See? A memorial service for a private Thomas Maddox, 1916. Kennel Mados uncle. But there is no record of his name on the monument in the churchyard. Only know it was said to be there. Cry blinked. You resign someone it asked it. I'm signed by Elite noticed it missing, and that it might not have been accidental. That evening, Miss Marple returned to the church under the pretense of lighting a candle. The air was cool, and the scent of polish and in the like a quiet morning. She passed the altar, dipped her fingers in the holy water, and knelt. Then, instead of returning to her seat, turned toward the side easel where the war memorial stood. 31 names, etched in brass. She had studied them many times over the years. But now she looked for absence. No Thomas Maddox. She stepped closer and noticed something else. At the edge of the plaque, used about the bottom scroll, a single screw was newer than the others. Brick silver, not dulled with steam. She smiled fondly. Back home, she proceeded to pep their buttons beside the memorial Rabin Saya taken years ago for the Women's Guild booklet on the water's history. There, at the bottom, in a spot now blank on the actual plaque, was a font impression. Pette, T. Maddox EU 1916. Saya dito her notebook. Button, March to EVG, Edgewater Volunteer Guard. Name iras from plaque. Guay? Vai elite phone military records. Mados un credis honorable? If so, motive to silence her igual a protect legacy. What is that the true motive? Or use the most obvious? She set down her pencil. There were more pieces yet to emerge. And someone, somewhere, had gone to great lengths to erase more than a name. They had tried to erase a truth. The days following Bailey Green's death passed with a peculiar stillness over water, as though the village were holding its breath. The garden party having packed away, the bunting taken down, the cake stands returned, but the anise lingered, like a drought sleeping beneath a closed door. Miss Marple spent her time as usual, attending to errands, exchanging recipes, and tending her roses. To the casual observer, she was doing little more than eating her way through her second sober of the season. But in truth, she was washing, as she always did, and what she saw was that the villagers were behaving, in a word, badly. Nothing was that me concern the police, but in the subtle, telling was that revealed guilt, fear, or most often, the urging the city to appear blameless. At the post office, young Peter Large, who delivered Violet's mail, was quieter than usual. He expects he didn't receive many letters. Miss Marple said gently. Peter looked up from behind the counter. Not many, no, but she sent Kit a few. Big envelopes. Archival stuff, she said. Went to London mostly. And did she seem worried or excited? Hesitative. I do know, but, maybe, one time she asked me if he told the people here were proud of their history. He said yes. She laughed, not kindly. Miss Marple nodded, satisfied. Inspector cried, meanwhile, had turned his attention to Kenneth Maddox. The two men sat in the colonel's drawing room, surrounded by reminders of military service, from medals, regimental banners, and sepia photographs of stiff-armed young men in uniform. You served with distinction, Cry said, glancing around. Maddox nodded curtly. Yes, and my family before me. You found the body, Cry continued, and a pepper button. Yes, I went to pick up a napkin, and it was there by my foot. Odd thing, didn't even know it lost it, must be come off an old jacket. You wear old uniforms often. Not exactly, Maddox said stiffly. I have a regimental blazer, I wear for Remembrance Sunday. Maybe come from that. Cry raised a brow. 2 buttons, Kenneth. One phone by you, the other beneath the overturned table. Unusual, isn't it? Even no explanation, Maddox replied. But I assure you, he had no quarrel with Miss Grene. Sideways, persistent, yes, asked questions. That was she solente. But he had nothing to hide. Cry flipped a page in his notebook. What about your uncle, Private Thomas Maddox? Served in the Edgewater Volunteer Guard. Mado sighs Nerud. I don't discuss family disgrace. So it was disgrace? The kennel exhaled slowly. Deserted. At the summer. Court-martialed in absentia. Never seen again. My grandfather struck his name from the family Bible. It was a sham we bore silently. Until Miss Grene started asking why his name was missing from the memorial. She had no right to resurrect it, Maddox snapped. My family suffered enough without being dragged through it again. Did you speak with her the day of the garden party? No, I avoided her. Cry closed his notebook, unconvinced. That evening, Miss Marple stopped by the churchyard on her way home. She posed at the war memorial again. Her hand brushed the lower corner of the plaque, where a font outline man proved that a name had once been there. She had seen how carefully the villa preserved its public image. And she knew, from long experience, that few things upset respectable people more than the possibility of disgrace, especially disgrace made visible. As she stood in the fading light, she heard footsteps behind her. It was Sarah Caltorpe, the church organist. Oh, Miss Marple. Sarah flashed. I didn't mean to intrude. I sometimes walk this way in the evenings. It's peaceful. It is, Miss Marple agreed. Tout le soflate. Sarah nodded. Poor Miss Grene. You know her? I plada the service I attended. She was always polite, but intense. She also told me the church had secrets in its stone work. I didn't know what to say. Miss Marple smiled. It's not an unreasonable thought. Secrets are often kept in public places. People believe if they were visible, no one will look too closely. Sarah hesitated. I think she believes she could fix things by exposing them. And you? I think some things aren't hers, or Anjones, to fix. There was a sadness in her voice. Miss Marple tilted her head. This she has you anything about the plaque. Sarah looked away. She asked if it thought anyone would notice if a name disappeared from it. He said, yes. Eventually. Miss Marple said nothing, but made a small mental note. Sarah knew, possibly more than she admitted. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple added to her green pack of observations. Peter letter sent to London. Research? Madix admits uncle was a deserter. Anger genuine. What did not survive at a party? 2 buttons, one deliberate, one accidental. Sarah knew about name erasure. Regret in tone. Violet's motive. Truth. Others, motive. Silence. She tournée de page. La Iclipas, Violet found something worth exposing. Possible trigger. Plaque d'ulteration. Vad då är cham igual a murder? Or is a vatten a symbol? Not a clue? Who else make it implicate? She tapped her pencil. Symbols of power, especially when they were tied to loyalty, honor, and history. Someone who said the vatten not to kill, but to warn. Which meant the killer wasn't just afraid of exposure. They were afraid of being seen. By the end of the week, Inspector Crivelive found his man. Kenneth Maddox e announced at the station to his constable. Is to come for someone at the center of a sudden ad. The vatten, the missing name on the memorial, determined. They'll point to him. It's a most straightforward explanation. Constable Redfern frowned. But, sir, Miss Marple said. You know what Miss Marple said? Cry cutting. But this is a matter for trained professionals, not a teasipin amateur. Still, Redfern hesitated. Like many others in Ecuador, I learned that Miss Marple's opinions, however gently delivered, rarely proved mistaken. Meanwhile, Miss Marple was paying a quiet visit to Ellie Grene's cottage. Margaret Tilling, the housekeeper who had come in twice a week, met her at the gate with red eyes and a disraeli still clashed in one hand. She never gave me any trouble, Margaret said, leading her inside. Bit sharp, yes, but always polite. Padme fair, said little, though. Spent most of her time reading, or writing letters. Miss Marple glanced around. The cottage was small but airy. Bookshelves lined one wall, all of them filled with local history volumes, many bearing the father's stamp of the Eggwater Library. A small writing desk stood by the window, stacked with unopened mail and a letter-bound journal. She sat on one side where Margaret continued, dusting a picture from. Old songs. Military. Some of them, said her grandfather as her bed. Miss Marple nodded. These say were visitors. Not 11. She approved the desk and lifted the top page of the journal. Margaret made no protest. Violet, after all, was no longer here to mind. The entries were sparse and businesslike. That one stood out. Kenneth Maddox denied any knowledge of it. The Maddox. That town records indicate a property transfer in 1938 from Thomas to Edmund. Quiet transaction. No mention of dishonor. Guide pretense, sham, or concealment. Miss Marple blinked. Edmund? She read it again. Not Kenneth Maddox. Reverend Edmund Maddox. Back in the church office, Father Tekesbury stared in soca de revelation Miss Marple la before him. Reverend Maddox, he repeated, bare past years ago, I performed the very rites myself. I velieve guese sono private Thomas Maddox, Miss Marple said quietly, and the father of Kenneth Maddox. The vicar leaned back, stand, so Violet wasn't looking into military disgrace. She was tracing inheritance. Se discovered that the land Kenneth Maddox lives on Wesson Celilium by a man declared dishonorable, Miss Marple continued, but whose name advanced from history, and possibly from legal documents. Meaning the colonel's claim may not be valid at all. Kite, the vicar was hidden for a long time, so here that may not be about sham. It may be about property. Sham makes people retreat, Miss Marple said, but greed makes them act. Later that day, Inspector Cry stopped by Kinemados home once more, this time with more purpose in his step. We very opened the inquiry into your uncle's disappearance, said, and we'd like to ask about the inheritance of this estate. Mados' expression changed. That's private business. Not if someone was killed to protect it. The kennel stood. Are you accusing me of murder, Inspector? Cry met his gas. Jury suspect. That's all. Maddox folded his arms. He didn't kill Miss Grene, but he did know what she found. She confronted me, twice, said the land was tainted. He told her to leave it alone, that my family suffered enough. Did you threaten her? No, I said. Then, mocked, he begged her. Cry didn't look satisfied. That evening, Miss Marple para social calta in Frekla, an elderly widow with a penchant for virching, and an uncanny memory for bitter affairs. She lived next to the Maddoxes when the moon was still alive, Miss Marple said, over a modest Sari. Oh yes, se le merececla. Quiet man, kept to himself, but proud, you know, proud of his father, despite the sham. Never denied the connection. Se le restore the family name. And did Miss Marple asked, Emersecla tilted her head, tried to up the church post, ras his own well, but there was always something unfinished. Miss Marple leaned closer. Do you remember anything about the estate? The land they live on? Well, I know it was left to moon in a bit of a hurry. There was some illegal fuss, but no one made it public. Miss Marple nodded. Only someone were to prevent that transfer invalid. Emer's eyes glamed. It would scandalize the Maddox name all over again. Back in her parlor, Miss Marple took up her notebook again. Kenneth Maddox, inheritance possibly invalid. Bailey discovered it. Reverend Maddox, the connection Bailey was tracing. Estate records alter, Bailey confronted Kenneth. Motive not only sham, but legal risk. Possibly eviction. She posed, then added a new line. But on it. Guld be so careless as to leave a button? Anna Notter. Who benefits if suspicion falls on him? Say underline that question twice. Then circled it. The next morning, Miss Marple received a small envelope in the post. No return address. Inside was a single object. A tear pepper button. This one, Clean. Unternised. Planted. Miss Marple stared at it for a long moment, then reached for her coat. It was time to visit Sarah Calthorpe again. It was on Thursday morning, while arranging the dahlia stems in a jar by her window, that Miss Marple received a most curious delivery. The post arrived as usual. 2 circulars, a postcard from her nephew Raymond in Florence, and one brown envelope with no return address. Inside was a small object wrapped in tissue paper. A pepper button, identical to the one found near Billy Grene's body. Miss Marple turned it over in her fingers. It was cool, smooth, and unblemished. Unlike the first two, one scuffed, the other slightly tarnished from weather. This one had a fine smell of polish and no wear at all. She examined it closely beneath the lamp. The crest was crisp and sharp. It had not come from the garden. It had been prepared. Say murmuré de loud. Someone is trying to be clever. That same afternoon, Inspector Craig was standing in the vicarage study, staring with frustration at the war memorial records. They don't make this easy, he grumbled, flipping through faded pages and brittle notations. Father Tekesbury, who had come at the inspector's request, Pirro ver hischoulder. De didn't take things electronically in 1916. Inspector. The vestry record book is in Reverend Mado's handwriting. That's the best guiave. Which makes it almost suspicious. Cry replied, tapping the blank space on the current memorial plaque rubbing. No mention of private Thomas Maddox. What we know is read. And vanished. And now Miss Grene ends up that after looking into it. The vicar hesitated. You don't think they can good. I think a family name means more to some than labor justice, Cry said darkly, especially when property is involved. But, Etralov, but, prompted the vicar. Cry frowned. It's too clear. The buttons, the story. It all fits, which makes me suspicious. Miss Marple, meanwhile, had made her way to the villa library. She rarely required permission to browse, but on this occasion, she requested the key to the restricted archives. Emily Wilmot, the librarian, handed it over without hesitation. Miss Grene was in there often, she said, almost fondly, always asking about land deeds and military roles. Says she was writing a book on the water's forgotten history. This she said what kind of history. Emily Wilmot shrugged. Military scandal, she said. But more than that, she mentioned something about deliberate omissions. She had a talent for unsettling people, that one. Miss Marple entered the small archive room and began with the obvious, land grants, military rosters, and village maps. The name Maddox appeared multiple times, most often tied to property along the western edge of the village. Then, tucked in the 1939 folder, she found a thin envelope labeled Veterans Relief 1922. Inside, a list of disbursements from the government to former servicemen. At the bottom, in faded ink, Pete, T. Maddox declined. Record incomplete. Service unresolved. She also noted one adjacent name. Caltorpe, a note for field commendation. Letter enclosed. Miss Marple frowned. Caltorpe. The name was familiar. She had heard it recently. Sarah Caltorpe, the choice organist, who had been hardly hesitant when asked about by elite. Was it possible? She flipped through to the back of the folder and found a small folded letter. It was yellow, but legible. A citation of bravery under fire, recommendation for commendation. The recipient, Alfred Caltorpe. The final paragraph made her breast catch. Private Maddox took responsibility for misread orders to protect Caltorpe, whose actions had prevented men from shelling. The common confusion was never formally resolved. Miss Marple set the letter down gently. Private Maddox hadn't deserted. Ede Ben sacrificed, his name tarnished to save another. And now someone tried to silence the only person uncovering it. Later that evening, Miss Marple made her way to the modest home of Sarah Caltorpe. The young woman answered the door with encesta in her fingers and music seats tucked under one arm. Oh, Miss Marple, is something wrong? No, Miss Marple said pleasantly. Merely a social call. Sarah hesitated, then stood aside. The room was sparsely furnished. A piano by the wall, a reading chair, and a small fireplace. Miss Marple sat with the ease of an old friend, then produced the button from her and began placing it on the table. Does this look familiar? Sarah stared at it. Her expression didn't change, but her voice seemed. It's one of those army buttons, like the ones on Canon Mado's coat. It came to me in the post, Miss Marple said. Clean, polished, not found in a garden, you understand. Sent, planted. Idon, what are you implying? That someone wanted to steal suspicion, and that someone understands precisely how people see kinematics. Sarah said nothing. Her eyes dropped to the button. Your father, Miss Marple continued gently, was a brave man, a sublives. Vare carry guilt, didn't he? That another man, Maddox, was blamed to protect him. Sarah's voice broke. Spoke of it only once. Late at night, said it was the only way. Maddox insisted. And when Violet began to dig, she didn't understand, Sarah whispered. She saw injustice, but not the sacrifice being did. She wanted to expose it all. Mado saw calle desertion, the missing plaque, the land deeds. She didn't see what it good to my father's name, his memory. Miss Marple guativ. I dinte kill her, sarase suddenly. Bari, I gwon her. I says she was making enemies. That people bowling te tank here. And this someone over there that warning. Sarah's eyes widened. I don't know. Miss Marple stood slowly. Then it might be time to find out who else has something to lose. That night, alone at her writing desk, Miss Marple returned to her notice. By elite found, false desertionary connection to caltorpe implications of inheritance fraud. Vaten mal igual a distraction sarà igual a emotion motive, but not physical means. Huabot, schiturnet to a new pagean underlined one name. Edmund Maddox, not the kennel. His brother, Guay, Bukis Mund, the town solicitor who has stayed well away from suspicion. A man with access to land deeds. A man who stood to lose everything if Violet's findings reached the authorities. And, most crucially, a man with an alley to plant a button. The air in Egweter grew heavy with the scent of turning leaves and suspicion. The days were still warm, but the crispness of autumn whispered through the hedgerows, rustling secrets unburied in the soil. It was in this atmosphere of uneasy quiet that Miss Marple found herself in the offices of Maddox, the villa solicitor and Kenemado's younger brother. His small office at about the chemise, tacked away venador that bore an ahin brass plaqué. Maddox is on galafers and comediansin. The name had lingered, told the son Gwes Longan, and Moon himself was a sin man, stooped at the shoulders with a perpetually downturned mouth and fingers stained with ink. He greeted Miss Marple with polite confusion. Miss Marple, what a pleasant surprise. How may I assist you? She smiled gently and took a seat opposite his desk, resting her handbag on her lap. I hope I am not intruding. M.R. Maddox. Ibe simply come with a few small questions. About by Elik Grene. Edmund stiffened the verso slightly. A tragic business. I didn't know her well. No, I don't suppose many people did, Miss Marple said thoughtfully. But it seems she had been consulting legal records. Landowner shops, primarily. Edmund nodded once. That's correct. She came by last month to ask about inheritance filings from the 1930s. It referred her to the archives. You didn't find her inquiries unusual. Edmund folded his hands. Unusual, yes, but not illegal. People investigate family trees for all sorts of reasons nowadays. Miss Marple studied him. M.R. Maddox, did you know that the estate you return now lives on once belonged to your grandfather, and then, ligue, to your father? Edmund flinched. It was a family transfer. There is no proof record, she said softly. Which means Miss Grene might have uncovered a falsified deed. Perhaps when you were involved in. His eyes darted to the side. It was a junior clerk then. He simply did what he was told. By your father? Edmund didn't answer. She also uncovered a military citation. Miss Marple continued, showing that your grandfather was accused of desertion. Vatare might have attacked the blame to protect another soldier, Alfred Caltorpe. Edmund leaned forward, voice lowered. None of this is relevant to her dad. Isn't it? Miss Marple asked gently. She threatened to expose the truth. You had both motive and opportunity, and knowledge of where to strike. He looked at her, alone. Cool gas. Say was going to ruin this village. He said at last, tear open all guns, overturn property claims, destroy my brother's name, and my father's before him. And for what? I get with no roots here. No understanding of what it means to protect a legacy. Miss Marple folded her hands. So you admit? I admit nothing, Edmund says sharply. And if you have an official business here, Miss Marple, I must return to my work. She rose with a nod. I understand. Thank you for your time, M.R. Maddox. You were ben kite illuminating. Outside, the wind stirred the hedgerows, and Miss Marple paused on the steps. There had been no confession, of course, but there never was, not in the early stages. What mattered were the cracks in the facade, and the moon's adieux began to show. That evening, the village held its monthly Paris Council meeting in the community hall. Attendance was in, but tensions ran high. The murder had cast Alonso. Colonel Maddox sat stiffly in the back, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Sarakal torpe raiv late, hergerum brused, heraista ierv. Peter Larch lingered awkwardly by the table, clearly out of place. And then, there was Margaret Ling, Violet's housekeeper, who, for the first time, stood to speak. I think, she said, voice trembling, that Miss Grenady deserves a public word. There was a murmur of agreement. She came here alone, Margaret continued, but she was keen. She listened to people others ignored. She cared about truth. Maybe too much, but she didn't deserve to be left in a rosebus unspoken of only in whispers. Silence followed. Colonel Maddox Rose. She dishonored my family's name, I said, but with less force than before. But she wasn't cruel, and perhaps some truths are overdue. I sat again, exhausted. Miss Marple remained silent, listening. After the meeting, she probed Peter Larch would see the under the gas lamp low. Peter, she said kindly, you delivered Violet's post, didn't you? And nodded. Yes, ma'am. Did you ever see who picked up her outgoing mail? His brow furrowed. What do you mean? Letters don't always travel alone, I said. Sometimes someone intercepts them, especially if they were being sent locally. Peter hesitated. There was one afternoon, he left the album's shell on her gate, like usual. When he came back 5 minutes later, it was open. Nothing missing, far as I could tell. But someone at tampered with it. And nodded. Thank you, Peter. That's very helpful. Back home, Miss Marple updated her notice. Edmund igual a motive, preserve family name, legal implications. Intercepted mail igual a someone fear contents reaching solicitor or press. Peter igual a witness to tampering. Margaret igual a emotional truthier, likely innocent. Sarah igual a conflict of loyalty, motive emotional, not material. Antens she wrote, Bailey died after final visit to solicitor's office. Sin by Margaret. Letter never sent. Vatten posted to me. By whom? She posed. A plan was forming. Not dramatic, but effective. The next chapter would be the most delicate of all. She would test the mind behind the murder. And minds, she had learned, always revealed themselves. Eventually, by the time Sunday arrived, Edgewater seemed to all its breath again. The murder investigation, which had dominated every doorstep and shop counter for over a week, now simmered quietly, used beneath the surface. Miss Marple, after church, strolled slowly along the villa green. She nodded politely to passing parishioners but lingered deliberately near the home of Margaret Tilling. Bailey Gren's old cottage, now wet and shattered, looked as if it had never housed anyone of note. And yet, within those walls, a storm of truths had been uncovered. And, Miss Marple suspected, others were still waiting to be found. She had made arrangements with Margaret the night before and now approached the cottage again, this time with a purpose. Margaret greeted her nervously. You're sure this is all right? If weren't going to be in trouble with the police. Perfectly all right, Miss Marple assured her. The police have their message. You have a minute. Inside, there was still tin with lavender polish and old ink. The writing desk was untouched since Miss Marple's last visit. But today, she had asked Margaret to open the lakeside cupboard, when the constables had apparently missed in their earlier search. It opened with a crack. Inside were several sick file folders, neatly labeled in Violet's hand. One read, Edgewater Stat Title Dispute. Another, Private Correspondence Maddox Family. But the one that caught Miss Marple's eye was simply marked, the Pepter button. She opened it and found, at last, context. There were several pages of typed notice, as well as a map of the village overlaid with ink annotations. The most curious among them was a letter, to whom it might concern. If this reaches you, you have likely been silence. The evidence here concerns the falsification of land records related to the Maddox family estate and the deliberate removal of a name from the war memorial. The root of this falsification lies not with Colonel Maddox, but elsewhere. Miss Marple leaned closer. It lies with Edmund Maddox, solicitor and executor of several disputed claims. There is reason to believe alter legal documentation to obscure a dishonorable discharge from the family record and preserve the estate under fraudulent precedent. The letter was unsigned, but the typing, the paper, the tone, Gueran mestakabli violets. Mis Marple read guais. Ten sei turneto de final pagin de file and froze. Der, tacting with a notice, guesa photograph. It saw two young men, clearly from an oterera. Seated on a bench, their uniforms neat, one wearing a sergeant stripe. The bag was labeled in violet's pen. Thomas Maddox and Alfred Caltorpe, 1916. Confirm friendship prior to some orders. Vata wasn't el mis Marples gas. In the background, almost blurred by sunlight, stood a woman. She wore a long coat under the chill by the hand. The woman was a mistake with a younger Winifred Cla, Margaret Jean's aunt, and the child, if one looked closely enough, was Moon Maddox. Miss Marple left the cottage shortly after, her mind racing. The falsification of records had deeper roots than even she had expected. Edmund and Tess simply preserved a legacy. He had grown up knowing the truth, that the family name rested on a falsehood, and that a man's disgrace had become a foundation stone for his future. And now that truth was unraveling. She returned to her cottage and pulled out her notebook. Vaieli Trust, the alter title of the estate. The erasure of Thomas Mado's name from the War Memorial. The military citation protecting Alfred Caltorpe. And now, an early photograph proving contact between Moon, the Maddox family, and the Caltorpes. Motive, legal exposure. Family dishonor. Ruin of professional reputation. What new possibility? Edmund might not have killed Violet. It might have tried to stop her. Who would silence her permanently? Suppose, pencil tapping against her palm. Someone with access to her files? Someone who knew what was coming? Someone who knew enough to from Edmund? A shadow crossed her face. Kenneth Maddox? That afternoon, Miss Marple attended a meeting of the Villa Preservation Society, rather awkwardly, in the summer hall where the garden party preparations had been finalized weeks earlier. The topic of discussion was supposedly the repainting of the schoolhouse doors, but everyone's mind was elsewhere. Kenneth Maddox was in attendance, sitting near the back. His unseproud posture seemed deflated, and no longer met the eyes of his neighbors. After the meeting, Miss Marple proved him. You seem witty, Kenneth. A manid a faint smile. Tired of suspicion, Miss Marple. That's all. And yet, I said, the suspicion might not be entirely misplaced. A glance at her, sharp now. Are you accusing me? I'm asking you, I replied, if you knew your brother afford the deed transferring the estate into your name. Stiffened. If found a letter, I said gently, one Bailey prepared in the event of her death. She believed the deception was yours. Kenneth Maddox was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I wasn't wrong. But I didn't kill her. Did you confront her? Yes, I asked her to stop. Begged her. I didn't go on the estate taken away. It was alive, but I never laid a hand on her. Miss Marple watched his face. Then who? Kenneth. He looked away. I think it was Edmund, said Arceli. He said the take care of it. I assumed they meant legally. But after she died, I began to wonder. Miss Marple placed a hand on his arm. Sometimes, I said softly, the truth was for the moment when everyone has something to lose. That's when it speaks the loudest. Back home, Miss Marple sat with her diary open. She now believed the Moon had intercepted Violet's files. She now believed Kenneth Maddox had lied about his knowledge of the estate. But I also believed neither brother delivered the fatal blow, because there was one piece still missing. The moment Bailey died, and what she had said in those final minutes. And for that, Miss Marple needed someone who had seen it. Someone small, someone quick, and someone who never spoke unless asked directly. Peter Larch, the postboy. The golden light of late afternoon spilled across the villa green as Miss Marple strode toward the small cottage at the edge of Guren's lane. Autumn was settling into a weather in earnest. The breeze used sharp enough to tug at the corners of scarves and the edges of secrets. Her destination, however, was not the vicarage or Kenneth Mado's home, but the humble lines of Peter Larch. Peter, a Headwaters 20-year-old postboy, lived with his aunt above the greengrocers. He had been in the background of this mystery since the start, quiet, nervous, always watching. Miss Marple knocked gently on the door. It was Peter who answered. Oh, Miss Marple. Hello, I said, blinking in surprise. I wonder if I may borrow a few minutes of your time, Peter, she said kindly. I promise it's not about your punctuality. I opened the door wider, and she stepped inside. The small sitting room smelled faintly of bread and bowl polish. Peter gestured for her to sit. He looked uncertain, fiddling with the hem of his sleeve. I know you were there, Peter. Miss Marple said without preamble. On the day by Ellie grenade, not used in the garden, but at the rose bushes. You saw what happened, didn't you? His mouth opened, then closed. You don't have to protect anyone, she said gently. But I believe you were the only one who saw her last moment. And I think it's been weighing on you. Peter stared at his shoes for a long time. She fell, a whisper. She didn't scream. She just fell, and then someone bent over her. Who? Peter swallowed. It wasn't Colonel Maddox. I thought it might be Ben, but it wasn't. He looked up. It was Merriman. I saw him coming out from behind the trees. He was holding something, a folder, I think. He looked pale, not angry. He was pale. Miss Marple nodded slowly. You didn't say anything. I didn't want to get involved, he said miserably. And when everyone started talking about the kennel, I thought it was better to let it be. Miss Marple stood and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Thank you, Peter. You helped more than you know. That evening, Miss Marple wrote 2 brief letters. One was addressed to Inspector Cry, requesting his presence the following afternoon. The other she hand-delivered, slipping it through the letterbox of Amado's office. A simple message written on her best stationery. There will be a gathering at the vicarage at 2 o'clock tomorrow. I believe it is time we put the matter to rest. Teme. The next day, under a pale sky and the watchful gas of the war memorial, the suspects gathered at the vicarage. Colonel Maddox arrived first, Samara and Drone. Sarah Caltorpe came next, pale and tense. Margaret Tilling stood to one side, clasping a handkerchief. Peter Large kept his eyes on the ground. And last of all came Maddox, briefcase in hand, his brow furrowed. Inspector Cry stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. Miss Marple, seated by the window with her knitting resting in her lap, looked at each of them in turn. I thank you all for coming, she said calmly. I realize this is most unusual, but I have found that when truths are hidden, sometimes only a quiet gathering will allow them to surface. She looked at Edmund. M.R. Maddox, you intercepted Miss Gren's files, didn't you? Edmund opened his mouth, then closed it. He did, admitted. I fear what she'd uncover would destroy everything my family built. But you didn't kill her. He looked up, startled. No, he said. No, I didn't. I confronted her. I pleaded with her. She refused. I left her by the rose bushes. I talked. She micro-considered. That was all. Miss Marple turned to Sarah. You know what your father had done. That private Maddox took the blame for him. Sarah's lips trembled. Yes, I didn't want it known. Not because he was ashamed, but because he told people would see my father differently. He was a hero. He used, and let someone else take the fall. You told Bailey to stop. He did, but I swear, he never touched her. Miss Marple nodded, then turned to Peter. You saw something more, didn't you, Peter? Peter looked up, his voice barely audible. He saw Bailey target with a Merriman. Then, he saw her step back. Her foot caught the trees. She lost her balance. She fell. There was a collective gasp. She wasn't pushed. Cry asked. No, said Peter. But the look on Merriman's face. I think she was dead. And then took the folder from her bag. Cry turned to Edmund, expression sharp. You removed evidence from a crime scene. Edmund nodded. Chamefa said. Yes, it was afraid. Miss Marple spoke once more. Afraid of what the truth might do to a name. But in doing so, you deepened the mystery. You allowed suspicion to fall on your brother. You watched as the village chose a scapegoat. And all the while, the truth remained a simple, sad accident, complicated only by fear. There was silence. Then Colonel Maddox spoke. I didn't know, said quietly, about the inheritance, about father's lies, about Thomas. He told Bayelit was attacking our legacy, but she was only trying to restore the truth. Inspector cried clear his throat. Well, no murder, it seems. But abstraction of justice, removal of evidence. You are becoming with me, mathematics. Edmund nodded. Miss Marple rose and offered her hand to Sarah, who took it with shaking fingers. Some truths, I said gently, have guati lonenog. The following Sunday dawned crisp and golden, there filled with the scent of turning leaves and wood smoke. Edgewater was beginning, tentatively, to return to itself. The vicar's sermon that morning was more subdued than usual, dwelling on themes of truth and redemption. Parishioners are in quiet reflection, their eyes occasionally flicking toward the front pew, where Miss Marple sat wistfully hands and an expression of serene attentiveness. Word had already spread, of course, not the full story, but enough to satisfy the village's curiosity. Vaeli Grenes de Ata Ven ruled a tragic accident, caused by a fall, not malice. But the deeper truth, the one that could not be published in the Paris Circular, was shared in more hushed tones over tea and span cake. That evening, in her cottage on Church Lane, Miss Marple sat with her friend over a modest supper. I still don't understand, Emerald Bamburi said, spooning ham onto a scone. If no one killed her, why did it all feel so sinister? Miss Marple poured another cup of tea. Because, my dear, that, intentional or not, as a way of shocking loose the mass people were. And Baeli Grene, with her questions and her quiet determination, threatened to unravel more than one carefully managed reputation. Emerald Bamburi leaned forward. But that poor solicitor, what will become of him? Emerald Maddox will be formally reprimanded, Miss Marple said. Possibly disbarred, but not imprisoned. He admitted to interfering with evidence, yes, but it did not cause Miss Grenes de Art. And now that the truth is known, he suspected will retreat from public life with as much dignity as he can muster. And Colonel Maddox. A humble man, said Miss Marple gently, perhaps for the better. As in what's Islands and inherited predicando. Will keep his land, for now, but perhaps with a more open air. M.S. Bamburi sipped her tea. Still, he would never have guessed. Al that fuss over buttons. Miss Marple smiled. Ah, the buttons. In truth, they had been the key all along. The fierce button had been found beside Violet's body, overlooked at first as incidental. But Miss Marple has in Aronce what it symbolized, not a struggle, but a statement, a military badge of honor, or dishonor. The second had been planted, deliberately, almost too obviously, an attempt to divert suspicion onto Colonel Maddox. The third, delivered to her door in an envelope, had been the most telling of all. It hadn't come from the kennel, nor from by elite. It had been sent by someone who understood that symbols could be louder than confessions, and more misleading. Someone who had feared exposure, even more than blame. And yet, in the end, it had only highlighted their guilt. The village memorial had been restored within the week. Miss Marple stood quietly in the churchyard one afternoon as the final screw was driven into the updated plaque. She had written a small note to the vicar recommending the addition of one name, Private Thomas Maddox, who, in protecting another soldier from scandal, had borne sham in silence for decades. His legacy deserves honesty, she said, as does our village. Norby, Sarah Calthorpe stood watching, hands clasped tightly together. When the workers stepped away and the plaque shone new in the afternoon sun, separate Miss Marple. Even ever thanked you, I said softly. Miss Marple smiled. There is no need, my dear. But I hope you have found some peace. I think you have, said Sarah. I was so afraid that my father's story would be lost, or worse, misunderstood. But now, perhaps, people will remember him differently. Miss Marple's gaze lingered on the name. They will. And in remembering him, they remember Thomas Maddox, though, a man who gave up honor to preserve it. They stood in silence a moment longer, until the chimes of the church bell reminded them both of the hour. Later that evening, as Miss Marple returned home, she paused by her writing desk and took out her notebook. She turned to the final page and wrote, in her neat hand, the truth, unsevered, glooms quietly when given light. Vaieli grenesod justice, not vengeance. She stirred thus from names unforgotten, and in doing so, exposed the rod that comes from secrets el tolon. Vate gretes is seat was not herdeat, nor the legal lies, vate believe that silence will protect honor. In the end, only the truth can do that. She closed and not the book. Then, as I always did after serving a case, she folded her knitting into its basket, made herself a modest pot of cocoa, and settled by the fire with her thoughts. Outside, the church bell to 11, and the weather, 11 again, fell into its quiet rhythm, older, wiser, and perhaps a little more honest than before.